When a narcissist can't manipulate you, this happens. When a narcissist realizes they can no longer manipulate you,
Hmm.
their entire emotional strategy begins to collapse in real time. The power they once felt in controlling your reactions suddenly disappears, and that alone creates deep psychological discomfort. They are no longer dealing with someone who reacts emotionally on command, and that changes everything in their behavior. At first, they try harder, because narcissists rarely accept that their influence over someone is actually gone. They may increase charm, guilt, or confusion tactics, hoping you will return to your previous emotional state. But when you stay calm and unaffected, their usual manipulation tools stop producing any predictable results. This is where the narcissist begins to feel something they deeply avoid, which is a loss of control. Because control is not just a preference for them, it is the foundation of their emotional stability. When you stop reacting the way they expect, they start questioning their own effectiveness in the relationship. They may shift into silent treatment, hoping your anxiety will pull you back into emotional dependence. But when you do not chase, their silence loses the power it once had over your emotions. This creates confusion inside them because they are not used to being emotionally irrelevant to someone. Narcissists often rely on predictable emotional responses to feel secure in their interactions with others. When those responses disappear, they begin to experience internal frustration and even hidden panic. At this stage, they may test you with indirect insults or subtle provocations to regain your reaction. But your emotional neutrality becomes a mirror that reflects their behavior without feeding it energy. This is one of the most destabilizing experiences for a narcissist because attention is their emotional fuel. When attention is no longer freely given, they feel as if their psychological supply is being cut off. They may try to provoke jealousy by mentioning other people or creating imaginary competition. But when you show no emotional disturbance, their attempt loses meaning and impact immediately. This is when narcissists begin to realize that manipulation is no longer a reliable tool with you. And that realization slowly shifts them from confidence into quiet insecurity and frustration. They may start revisiting old patterns, trying different tactics that once worked in the past. But each failed attempt reinforces the truth that you are no longer emotionally controllable. At this point, their ego begins to feel threatened, because control was always tied to their identity. Without control, they start to feel exposed, as if their emotional mask is no longer effective. Some narcissists respond by escalating conflict, trying to force a reaction through emotional pressure. Others withdraw completely, hoping distance will reset your emotional boundaries back to weakness. But when neither strategy works, they begin facing something they rarely confront, which is rejection of influence. This is not simple rejection of them, but rejection of their entire psychological system of control. When that happens, narcissists often experience narcissistic injury, even if they never admit it openly. They may appear calm on the surface, but internally they are processing a deep sense of defeat. Because for them, being ignored is more painful than being argued with or even hated. Silence without reaction becomes a form of emotional punishment they cannot easily escape. They begin to feel irrelevant, and irrelevance is something their ego cannot tolerate for long. This is where some narcissists attempt one final strategy, which is sudden idealization again. They may act kind, attentive, or emotionally available, trying to restart the emotional cycle. But by now, you have already seen the pattern, so their performance feels predictable and empty. When they realize even charm no longer works, they begin to lose interest or shift targets, because narcissists rarely stay where their influence is no longer effective or rewarded. At this stage, what you are witnessing is not just frustration, but a full breakdown of control dynamics. And for the first time, they are forced to experience a relationship where they are not the emotional center. That experience creates discomfort because it removes the illusion of superiority they rely on. When a narcissist cannot manipulate you, they are no longer dealing with resistance, but emotional independence. And emotional independence is the one thing that consistently dismantles their entire psychological strategy. They may leave, return, or test you again. But the dynamic has already changed permanently, because once manipulation stops working, the relationship is no longer based on control, but awareness. And awareness is exactly what turns their old power into something completely ineffective. In the end, what happens is simple, yet deeply unsettling for them to accept. They meet someone who no longer participates in the emotional game they built their identity on. And when that game no longer works, the narcissist is forced to face a version of reality they cannot control.